as a stay-at-home mom about communicating. My boys were very academically endowed. They were reading on a second grade level when they went to kindergarten. They knew their multiplication tables going into first grade, which was wonderful. However, it does present a little bit of a problem. When you're 5 years old and in kindergarten, and you know how to read about letters and sounds and how they work together, you get bored. And at 5 years old and a little boy, you are bouncing off the walls, but you don't really get that everybody else doesn't get it the way you do. When you move on to first grade and the teacher is teaching everyone 1 plus 1 and you know 7 times 8, what do? You get bored. Now, when little boys get bored, they start doing stuff and just not to be disruptive intentionally, but they're just hyper, they're active, they're interested in things. And in their mind, they don't understand that everyone else doesn't get it the way they do. Now, I could be one of those moms that says, okay, Miss So-and-so, you've got to teach, little Joseph this way and that way, and you've got to do this for him and do that for him. I get pigeonholed as the overzealous mom at that point. And I don't have an active and attentive listening audience. I get pigeonholed. It's like, oh, special. Now, 6 weeks later into the school year, when they're, oh my gosh, Miss Morris, what do I do? He's bored, but he's not doing bad stuff, but I don't know what to do. Now, I have an attentive audience. The teacher is willing to listen to the insights that I have, keeping them busy, keeping them active. We were able to bring in a 3rd grade math book in 1st grade. We were able to have them tutor other children. But I had to wait until they were ready to receive that information. And I say that to tell you the story. I tell this story so that we can understand the importance of your audience being ready to hear what you have to say. Just because you have information to share, if your audience isn't ready to hear it, are you really communicating? Now at some point, each of us in our professional life need to convince someone of an idea. We need to share something with someone. It may be, my company is the greatest company. We're going to change the world, like the GE commercials were saying. We're going to change the world. You got to convince somebody of that. Or you can say, please invest. I've got the greatest nonprofit. You have got to invest in this company, in my business, in me, because you just have to do this. Or you're looking for a job and you need to convince someone to hire you. You need to hire you. Well, you've got to make sure you've got that captive audience. But before we can convince, the other party must be willing to listen. Now, in doing research for this presentation, I gathered a few elements central to effective hearing and communicating for the business professional. Our topic for this quarter's mini conference centers on communication. As small business owners, we have frequent opportunities to present to crowds that are technical, that are non-technical, that are large, that are small, that are experienced speakers, that are novice speakers. But whomever the audience is, we need to make sure we're communicating in a way that they are willing to receive it. As we move through this portion of our presentation, we'll examine this aspect from a little bit of an academic approach, as Anita did. We're going to look at deterrence to effective communication. We're also going to look at some foundational elements of effective communication and a few necessary tools. Now, our first deterrent, gossip. As Eleanor Roosevelt so eloquently stated, great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Small minds discuss people. Don't allow yourself to be reduced to being a small-minded person. This can be a credibility killer. And if you want to be influential, you want to be an effective communicator, Your influence and credibility is crucial. Judging. Being judgmental in your remarks or your comments or your presentation doesn't foster an atmosphere of open communication. People become resistant to hear what you have to say because they perceive you've already dismissed their perception, their views. I always have to remember, there's another side to the story. Even if you know you've got all the answers, you've got it all figured out, but do a little bit of research to find out the other side of the story so that you can understand where the other person is coming from, because that's the whole point of the communication. You want to be able to reach that person. Complaining and negativity. This is a big one. It's so easy to fall into that realm. If you thrive on negativity and complaining about this and complaining about that, your audiences are going to gradually turn away from you. Nobody really wants to hear all of that complaining. There's got to be something positive in your day, something. It's raining outside, it's cold outside, but it's a glorious day. We needed the rain. The cold is a breath of fresh air. It's a change of pace. That sounds so much better than, I'm complaining about this, I'm complaining about that. But it can be easy to fall into a mode of complaining because things aren't the way we want them to be or the way we perceive a perfect situation should be. We complain about everything. We complain about the weather, we complain about sports, politics, everything. But when we resort to complaining, we limit our influence and our available audience. Excuses, another deterrent. We've all met this person, and I hope we don't linger in being this person. They just pass the buck to everybody else to take responsibility for what happened. Oh, it was this reason why I didn't do this. I couldn't get over here because of this. It's always something, and you know when they're coming, oh, they got an excuse. You know, I already know they got an excuse because that's all they talk about, those excuses. If you've made a mistake, the quickest way to get someone to listen is to own it and make a sincere effort to make it right. If there are circumstances that led to you dropping the ball, that's okay. You can generalize the situation, but accept the fault and ownership and the consequences. Exaggeration, making something bigger than it actually is. It only results in a loss of credibility for you, the speaker, and the consequences can have a significant impact on your influence. Does anybody remember when Brian Williams was on the news, nightly news? He exaggerated a story a little too much. He was, in a plane during the Iraq War and was experiencing all of this stuff and telling this story over and over. He was on the Tonight Show and he was on all kinds of shows telling this story. And I'm sitting there watching it one night, and I'm not an engineer. I'm not an aviation person, but I'm thinking, really? Really? You did that, really? And lo and behold, he really did. He got suspended from NBC Nightly News, and he later got fired. I think he is working for MSNBC, but he exaggerated. It ruined his credibility. So make sure we keep that in mind, because when you exaggerate, you soon become associated with lying. Stretching the truth, whatever, you aren't shooting straight, you aren't being straightforward, you're basically lying. Again, that kills credibility, and people aren't going to be willing to listen to you, which negates your effectiveness as a communicator. Dogmatism. We are in Huntsville. We are in a town of engineers, very smart people. But we want to avoid the urge to be dogmatic. Dogmatism is a way of thinking that is stubborn and narrow-minded. Be very careful that your strong opinions about something don't come across in your presentation, because it's an opinion. So we have to be mindful, if you're communicating to get your point of view across to someone who may not share that same point of view, if you are dogmatic about it, do you want to, I don't want anybody pointing their finger at me and just, I'm not listening. I might not walk out, but I have tuned you out. So those are a few things that we want to make sure that we aren't doing. You shut out qualities such as reason and open-mindedness when you resort to being dogmatic. It turns listeners away. And like we said, if you want to persuade others to listen to you, to be effective at communicating, you've got to take their views into consideration when you're communicating. Now, let's take a hard turn. We talked about the things not to do, the deterrents to communicate, to effectively communicating. Let's talk about how we build our foundation for an effective mode of communication. When we deliver